今回の展覧会はですね、京都工芸繊維大学の京都デザインラボと、スイス連邦工科大学チューリッヒ校 ATH の、ランドスケープ研究室ですね、との、共同のワークショップの成果を見せるということがあります。で、そのワークショップっていうのは、何になっているかっていうと、ATH のそのランドスケープの研究室の方の、リサーチですね、3D スキャナーという、3D 画像をスキャンするスキャナーがあるんですけども、その 3D スキャナーと、サウンドレコーディング、音の計測ですね、を行われていて、これまでそのランドスケープの研究室としては、スイスおよびヨーロッパの、ランドスケープをそういうスキャナーで撮って、音を撮って、でそれを最終的には一つの、映像にしてプレゼンテーションするということをやられていて、で今回我々と共同するにあたって、京都の、庭園を3カ所選んで、でその、3カ所の庭園を、3D スキャンとサウンドレコーディングになって、計測すると。計測するだけじゃなくて、それを最終的には映像として編集して、プレゼンテーションするということを、やっています。で、具体的にはちょっと見ていただけると、その成果どういうふうな形になるかというのが分かると思うんですけれども、一番大きいのは、普通のその動画に、カメラによる動画の撮影と違って、事前にどういうアウトプットにするかというのを決めなくていいんですよね。3D スキャン、とにかくそのありのままを 3D データとして点の情報になるんですけど、それを採取して、音もなるべくたくさん採集して、でそれをパソコン上でどういうふうに見せるかっていうのを編集して見せると。でそれっていうのは、建築もランドスケープもどっちもそうなんですけれども、基本的にはその場に行かないと実際の体験ができないので、再現性っていうのが結構難しいものなんですね、そもそも。それをその計測と編集によって、リプレゼンテーションする、再現するということが一番メインで、今日はですね、その、研究室の、方々、クリストフ・ジローさん来られて来ていただいて、であと、サウンドレコーディングのメインでやられている、ナディーンさんです。で、同じくサウンドレコーディングのルドヴィヒさん。で、一番ここに言われるのが 3D スキャンを、メインでいただいているマティアスさんです。で、今日はうちの大学から、エルウィン先生が来ていただいているので、個人的にはなんかその 3D スキャンっていうリサーチをするテクノロジーっていうのと、その最終的にそれがクリエイティビティにどういうふうに生かされていくのかっていうのはちょっと知りたいなと個人的には思っています。はい、では僕からお願いして、よろしくお願いします。
こんにちは。京都工芸繊維大学のビライです。よろしくお願いします。今日暑い中来ていただいてありがとうございます。基本的には今日の会話は英語で行いますが、ゆっくり英語で話しますのでよろしくお願いします。So, welcome everyone. Welcome to this conversation. Christophe, Nadine, Ludwig, and Matthias. Maybe we can start by sharing with them what is the whole idea of this thing that we do in Kyoto, which I think is also what you do in Zürich. So maybe we ask Christophe to actually say something about it.
Thank you, Erwin, for the question. Thank you also for the KYOTO Design Lab, the invitation. why are we here and why are we bringing this technique? I believe that there are many differences between East and West, but there are also many similarities. And I think the similarity is that when a garden like the Shishindo was made, or when a garden like the Villa d'Este or Villa Lante was made in Italy, they were never drawn on plan. They were not made on plan. They were made in the landscape. They were made, and the plan came much later. Some plans came 100 years after the garden was made. So if we are in a design school, we should question the plan. And I've been questioning the plan in landscape architecture for many years because I don't think that the plan is the right tool, the right method to design a landscape. The landscape is about, it's like a body. It's about space, it's about sound, it's about light, it's about smell, it's about the world. And so we have been trying to bring back in teaching methods that are different than the plan. I'm not saying the plan is bad, I'm just saying the plan is not enough. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think it answers, and it shares very well the main reason, I guess, for doing this. Maybe I could do a bit of a Japanese translation to what you said to make it a little bit more comprehensive to everyone. ここで何をしているのかなという質問について、ランドスケープとかで何をしているんでしょう、このワークショップでということについて、最初に例えば四川道とか、あるいはイタリアのビラデエステとか、それを作った時に平面図がなくて、多分体を使って音を使って、それから状況からいろんなものを作られて、平面図はその後に来るんでしょうね。だから基本的に我々はやってるのは、多分その平面図化をちょっと問いかけると、それでいいなのか、教育ランドスケープの建築と建築の教育に大体プランである平面図から始まるんだけれども、実際はそうではないかと。だから実際にその体験からそちらに存在する状況からいろんなものが生まれているのではないかという基本的な多分理由だと思います。And then I guess that with this, may also it would be very enlightening if you could share with us what are the things like the concrete steps and tools actually to maybe explore this question about the plan and then and rediscovering again, I guess, the body and then the conditions that we are in. And so maybe Nadine could share with us about the things that we look into and then the tools that we use also to look into these things, to discover this questioning of the plan.
Well, the tools we are using as well as the methods, they are based on the conviction that we need to understand more about our perception. So we try to apply tools that allow us to understand and analyze the way, for example, how we perceive the garden, if we are sitting, if we are standing, if we are looking, or if we are listening. And this is a combination of spatial information on a more global scale, and on the other hand, of single perception that we depict by driving our perception to different attractions in the garden. It can be very simple, like a bird that we can hear, but it can also, which is attracted by a particular tree. Or it can be like a very special instrument like the shishi or it can be a carp that we see jumping out of the water. So this is always there in space, but it's just us that is picking them out to give them a special meaning. And so, more technically speaking, we are working with 3D tools on a spatial level. I think I would start, because we have the sound and the vision, I would start just explaining, because it's more of my field of expertise, to talk a bit about, explain you a bit about the sound and the method linked to it, and then pass to Matthias to explain the method of laser scanning. So for the sound, you can maybe also see on the process explanation as well, and as in the film that you will be able to look at later. We are using, for this global spatial analysis of the garden, a 3D microphone, which allows us to be immersed in space, to take with just one microphone sounds in different directions, and so reproduce this feeling of being inside a landscape. In addition to that, and this was also a very important part that we did with the students, we are using special microphones, like either smaller microphones, or hydrophones, like microphones you can put in the water, or a microphone with a parabolic screen where you can make like a zoom into a faraway bird to depict details. And then afterwards to use both these components to recompose our experience, because we think we can not just use a signal to, our perception is very complex, so we always have to reconstruct like in the videos that you see in these small umbrella structures, that these sounds you hear are always not just one microphone put in the garden, they are always recomposed of these two levels of the general spatial impression and these single impressions. All this we do on the one hand in a very systematic way. We always take notes, compositions, where we have been recording, because the location in the garden is very important. Which place we have to perceive this certain constitutional sound. On the other hand, afterwards we have to work also in an intuitive and creative way to be able to offer you an experience as these videos do. So it's kind of a recomposition. It has an analytic part. We make single recordings and we put them together again. And this has to be based also on very careful perception that we do when we are working on the site. So maybe I can, would you first...
そう多分どのように我々の環境の体験を意識するのかと、やっぱり我々の知覚を洗練しなければならない、やっぱり環境をもっと観察しなければならない。で、例えば庭の中で印象的な音、あるいは印象的な要素をそれを意識して、それを見て、大体それを測るということで、で、彼の専門はその音の専門だから、その音を記録するあるいはキャプチャーするということを、その作業をしなければならない。それをするためにはいくつかの道具を使っています。その 3D のマイクロフォンというを使ってやっぱりその音の中にいるということを記録すると。それからもう一つは
So we have, for example, we have just smaller microphones or not get close to material, or microphones that you can put in the water, or like a parabolic screen where you can do like a zooming to hear sound.
だからもう一つはその 3D マイクロフォンともう一つのそのズームインとかだからもっと近くに行くパラボリックマイクロフォンということもあります。それはもっとその近くに近づくするための道具ですね。で、すごいシステマティックな科学的なプロセスも行ってて、それは大体数字化するということで、やっぱりその正確などこのところかっていうことを全部それを数字に置き換えて またそれを分解して後でもう一度組み立てると構成するということをそのクリエイティブな作業も行っています。
So I think today it has become quite common, as it used to be drawing plans. Today it has become very common to also work in 3D. But I think there is a crucial difference between what usually is called 3D model and what we are doing here with the 3D scanner. Because the usual 3D model, also like the plan, is always drawn by a person. And what we are doing here with the 3D scanner is recording the reality. So I think this level of detail, by recording the three-dimensionality of these points and then combining it with photographic images, is very different to what we are used to when we talk about 3D models. And this can give you a lot of possibilities. So first of all, we can record in a very high detail, not only spatial, but only in color. We can also record by that the light situation in the garden. And all this is always connected to a global coordinate system. So we are kind of taking a moment, we freeze in time at a place with all its visual aspects and spatial aspects. And with this we gain the possibility to have new views on this site. We can change our perspective, our point of view can be very different to what we are used to. So we cannot just be in a situation as we would stand in the garden, but we can also choose a bird's view. We can also choose a view from under the ground. We can go very close to very fine details, but we can also go far away to see the context. So I think the 3D scanner is recording so many details and so many informations, and by combining the single scans we can generate this model that really gives us a new perspective on these gardens.
3D スカンはただの 3D スカンではないですね。ただの平面図ではなくて、やっぱりいろんな角度からその場所の状況を見ることができる。それを記録できます。で、いつもその 3D スカンの時に数字化しながら、それも世界の GPS システムとつながっているから、非常にある場所の特徴とかをいろいろ理解することができると。で、それも写真と含めてそれを組み合わせて光とか色とかいろんな空間環境の特徴を理解するできる。またそれもいろんな考察ができる。それを組み立ててそれをやり直してそのいろんな可能性もその探索ができると。で非常にその科学的な方法だからいろんなことも場所について教えてくれるんでしょうね。Thank you for sharing with us. And then Ludwig, would you want to add something about how this sound and space also would impact things? Because I think that maybe in your compositions, it actually involves space and sound. So if you have anything that you would like to share with us.
Yes, so what was very interesting for me in that process is you can't just go to a place and record it. Right? You can't just arrive somewhere, press record, and then you have the space captured. So on one hand, you need a lot of patience because the space has to evolve with time, and it sounds very different in each hour, and each day is different. Each season, of course, is very different. So it's something very ephemeral, and what happens if you start recording is that you notice all these changes and then you have to select what's important for you and which details of the environment are important and how you put them together. But first of all, you really just have to wait and to observe what sounds are there. Maybe Lindy is an interesting example because it's a very minimalistic space in terms of acoustic. But then when you spend time in the garden, you notice all these small sounds that happen when the rain starts and then you articulate the space with all the leaves. the sounds of the city, which one also shows very much. So maybe they're not always even audible, but it's sometimes also an idea of the sound that becomes real in the space when you're there. So when you just see trees, you maybe already hear the wind, right? So there's a very strong connection between the visual and the auditive aspect, which is always something imaginative also, which has a cultural context. And at the other part, it's also very interesting how our body relates to the space. So one will also show in their work how the body sounds are related to the sounds of the environment and the sounds of the city. So, and they describe that inside of the house of Ninihi you have a perfect balance because you can hear your own sounds of your body, and inside the space you produce the sounds of the city outside and the sounds of the garden. So sound is always also about balance and how each sound has its own space. So it's not just only one space actually, it's always several spaces coexisting. Right? When you stand in front of a house and hear maybe a forest, it's an own space with its own acoustic, own environment. Behind you have a house with different reverberations, each room sounds different materials, and you have a garden, and you have maybe even a pond with the carps that are under the water, and they also have their own sonic reality, which maybe you can't hear, but you can hear it through the mind. So in that way, even though the sound is so, you don't have like a million points we can hear in space like we can see, but in another way it's very complex because it doesn't happen on a conscious level, but rather on a very subconscious physical level.
ルビッさんは建築とか環境のことだけやらなくて、彼もその作曲家をやってるから、でさっきマタイアさんがその効果の話をして、ナディーンはその音の話をして、でその両方を込めて、もう一つの要素はその時間の要素です。その空間と音のことはやっぱり時間の流れの中で季節によっていろんなことが変化がありますね。だからそういうようなことも意識しなければならない時間の流れということです。で、ニリギという多分一つの例はすごい良かったと思いますので、すごい小さくて、だからその庭とその家、町家の中の空間はすごく小さいなんだけども、そちらからいろんなことを教えてくれる。その庭の音にしてもいろんな音がありまして、季節によって音も変わったりしてて、でその中にある空間とその庭の関係、またその家、町家の中の空間の音とその都市の外の音とか、そのような関係性もいろいろ教えてくれるんですねと。でやっぱりそれをもっといろいろ意識させるんですね。その時間とその体の関係ということも、そのような狭い小さい空間でいろいろ教えてくれるんでしょう。And Nadine, you share with us a little bit about the experience of maybe doing this survey, and then what are the impressions that stay with you about these surveys that you have done in Kyoto?
Well, first of all, it's kind of a luxury work condition to sit just in the garden and to record it all day. I think not many people are lucky to have this environment every day. But then it's also something really intense. You have to be very careful, and I think the students that participated to the workshop too. In the evening, you're very tired, and you realize that usually what I explained before, you're listening much more selectively, and now we are trying to all these places which are one from each other, very different, and this asks a lot of perceptual energy. So the experiences is really diving into the garden at the same time, trying to keep the overview, or if you want, so over here in this case. And this was very interesting and difficult to find a balance. This is the point of listening, maybe. Then the other point is also, I think it was a great chance also to, I think the garden, the Japanese garden, or more generally even the relationship to nature in Japanese culture. We probably know that from reading haikus, which are translated, or with reading theoretical literature. And I think it was very important to spend time in the garden, but also to work with students that have a Japanese background, to really understand a bit more how these single elements that we could read about are connected to each other. And so I think nowadays I would listen in a much more diverse way, and also look at, of course, to the Japanese garden. And what Ludwig was telling before is something we were very happy about to find. I think especially what we want to work on with the combination of these tools of laser scanning, 3D models, visualizations, and sounds. That sound is always part of a bigger impression of landscape, and both senses interact very strongly. And I think in each of the gardens we have been working on, we found new examples for maybe staying with, if we were talking about Mini, I take an example from there to have more continuity, but we can find that in every garden. This small garden is in the middle of Kyoto City. And it does not really have strong walls to create acoustic sounds in there, so we always hear the city, but we still feel some calm why that, and so only the combination of this way of depiction allowed us to show, but also to understand that there's a lot of softness in the texture of the garden, which, so we look at something, we have the idea of softness, which is a tactile idea, and which our perceptual memory is relating to a more silent sound environment. So I think for us it was a very rich environment also to find very good examples of these intersensory effects of perception. And I think there's also this work of the group that was working on Bonaya Garden, who is in all the way talking about this by reflecting on the dialogue between the presence, the real acoustic and visual presence of water, and its absence, and what can these mutually create in our appreciation of a place, and also for the impression of this calm that in a way is still probably a desire that leads a lot of people to go to this garden, no matter if they are far away or in the middle of the city.
ワークショップとかそれから日本庭園での今回の作業とかについてその印象はどのようなことか、やっぱりこの日本庭園とかあるいは重要文化財のところでこういうことを調査できるというとすごい正確なことでしょうね。ですごい貴重な体験で貴重な機会ですねと。でその中でやっぱり我々の五感とか知覚の仕方とかいろいろもう一度再認識させるんですね。その機会を与えられてこれたと思います。ナディーンの印象です。もっとこのワークショップをやってそのワークショップをやったおかげでやっぱり自分の環境自分の周りにあるものをもっと敏感になっているような気がします。だから我々の聞こえる音はただの音ではなくてやっぱりもっと大きな地球とかあるいは宇宙の中との一つの関係とかつながりがあるんでしょうと。 その交換とかもただの一つの単位ではなくて、やっぱりそのもっと大きなつながりがあるんでしょうと。でそれをやりながらその可能性とかも探索できると。例えばその学生たちがそのトライアというところで調査して、それから後で多分この作品にも見られる、聞こえることもあると思いますが、もしそのトライアの一つの要素をなければどのようなことあるんでしょうか、なるんでしょうかということをそういうことも試みすることもできますねと。それも探索できると。だからやっぱりそのワークショップでは我々の知覚の仕方とか、それから五感のいろんな関係性とその働きを教えてくれたんではないかなと私が思います。
One thing to another thing which is important is to not only talk about our experience but also the experience to work with the students. And I think maybe I would also like to involve my colleagues in that part, because I think we share the experience that obviously you need to translate. Maybe we should be ashamed that we come here for the third time. We still don't speak Japanese nowadays. So I'm sorry for that. But in a way, this work with this, not the plan, not the abstract sense of the garden, but this direct experience has allowed us, nevertheless, in very short time, to work with students that speak a bit English, of course, but we cannot speak very quickly, but to get very deep into the work and to create quite nice results. So maybe this is also a sign for the possibility, even if it's not shared syntax, maybe of certain possibility of sharing experience through this direct perception.
もう一つ印象的なのは、その学生たちと一緒にこういうワークショップをやって一緒に作業してて、いや我々もその日本語できないし、学生たちも英語の方は少しできますけれども、やっぱりそのコミュニケーションのことも生まれるんだけれども、でもそのなんだろう、抽象的なことではなくて、やっぱり実際に体験する、体の体験を使ってそちらでいろんなものを理解して込み立てるということは一つの勉強になりましたけど、言葉が足りなくてもそのコミュニケーションがなんとか成り立つということは一つの今回勉強になりました。
So you may ask why I spoke at the beginning about three-dimensional mapping, reproducing landscape as a body. Why sound? We live in an age, at least in the Western world, but I think it's the same thing. When I take the motorway from Kyoto to Berger, I see no landscape, I see only walls. Sound has been changed by engineering and by law into noise. And basically, almost no studies have been made about acoustics. There are acoustic studies in architecture for concert halls, theaters, philharmonics, but the rest doesn't exist. And what we found out by sampling sound, and there was an interesting exercise that was done by Ludwig when he arrived at ETH. He got sounds from the Kyoto Gardeins and gave it to Swiss students. And with the Swiss students, there were a few Japanese students. And of course, the famous haiku, pond in the garden, a frog leaps, sound of water, very famous haikus. What was really interesting is we realized that the Japanese student made perfect assemblage of sound, that they took the sound and reproduced the haiku. You didn't tell them, they just did it. It was their culture. And of course, the Swiss students with the same sound did not produce the same language. And I think that what's really interesting in that difference is that sound is probably the last really genuine, culturally different item that prevails in different societies. Sound, culture of sound is something very specific to each place. It's not global. I mean, you may hear frogs all over the planet, but the sound of a frog changes from one place to the next. And so the combination, we think, of sound research with three-dimensional modeling will allow us to go back, and I think that's the sort of credo that I have. I don't believe in globalized stylistics. I don't believe in one green language for planet Earth. We hear a lot about that. I believe that each place on Earth is different, and each person, and each sound. So that's what direction we're going in. And of course, theoretically, it makes us very weak. If you compare that to trends in landscape urbanism, all the isms that we've heard, we're not generalists. We can't come up and say, make a general statement about sound. Because depending on the culture, you will either really appreciate it, say it's good or bad, or it's meaningful, or you wouldn't even hear it. So I think that's why at the ETH we've created this lab, is because research on sound has not happened since the hippie times of the 60s, when people were sort of, thought the world was cool and cosmic. And I think that we should go one step further in really reproducing the body of research that combines space, spatial studies, landscape, and acoustics.
やっぱりその体のものを測るということではなくて、やっぱりいろんなものを理解するためには次郎先生が音ということがすごい大事でしょうねと。で多分音が文化によって違うでしょうと。音のこととかも一人一人に違うでしょうと。で我々は京都からのいろんな音をチューリヒに持って帰って、それで学生たち、チューリヒの学生たちと一つの実験をしてたんですね。それはルドヴィックがやったことなんだけれども、京都の音を学生たちに渡して、ある課題を出して、多分その課題はその場所の黒池、回路飛んでなんとかの音でしょうね。すいません、今覚えてないけど、その
古池や川と飛び込む。池の音だ。
池の音ということですね。はい、そのようなことを学生たちに渡したんだけれども、そのチューリヒの学生は日本からの学生たちも何人かいるんだけれども、日本の学生たちはやっぱりそのことを分かってて、ちゃんと構想化してそのようなことを正しくそのようなことを課題で作ってくれたんですねと。でもチューリヒのあるいはスイスの学生たちはちょっとやっぱり全然違うことをやってたんですねと。やっぱりその音とその文化がすごい関連してるから、やっぱりその実際にあるものを体験して自分の体の体験がすごい大事でしょうということを、それをもう一度考えましょうと。それでただの抽象的な平面図とか、あるいはその数字のことを今度計画とか設計でやるんではなくて、やっぱりその実際の体験と場所と文化とかのようなことを今度のランドスケープとかその計画とか設計でやっぱり大事なことでしょうと。我々はそのためにチューリヒでそのラボラトリーを作って、そのようなセンターを作って、そのような実験とか記録を作ったりとか、そのような研究を行う場所を作りました。
So I think also that the cultural dimension you just mentioned can be very well expressed in this form we have here of 3D model and sound, because it's obviously, it is somehow a map, but it's not an ideological map, so it doesn't hide what's in between the points, and doesn't hide that the sound is constructed, so it doesn't say that this is the house and this is the garden, but it rather shows a very subjective space. And also, what's very interesting from the combination of sound and image, and we were talking about this, is I mean, with sound you have something which you can form really in a fluid way, right? You can just layer two sound recordings together, and afterwards you will hear them as the same space. So you will always perceive one space at the end as you have one sound wave. So when you work with images, you can't do that normally. So you just have, you will have two layers of two different spaces, right? And when we work together in that way, the image becomes also fluid in a way. So you don't have that fixed perspective on one object. Maybe you can elaborate that better. But you can kind of work with sound and images in a similar way to really express your subjective attitude towards space, and I think that's also how it becomes a communicative process between the students and the we hear and see in the gardens, because it really expresses something very personal.
今日はやっぱり主観的なこととかを文化のこととかを理解させてくれるんですね。例えばその2つの音は重ねると1つの音になると、あるいは1つの空間でそのような2つの音1つの音になると。だからもっと主観的なことを実験することもできると。まあ空間とかやっぱりそのイメージがあって2つのイメージを重ねるということもその作業は多分それはマタイアスが話してくれるんだけれども、今回のワークショップはそのコミュニケーションとその主観的な要素もただ客観的な要素だけではなくて、例えば主観的な要素を設計とか環境とかを想像するためにはその一つの欠かせないことを理解させたんですよね。
I think also one part of this comparison that we often discuss is that this fact that in sound is always evolving in time, but the model is always frozen in moment. So only the movement, and that's what is very personal for everyone. Only by the movement we can kind of discover the space how we would like to, and can kind of communicate how we would really try to approach this space. And I think the movement is something also that we cannot experience from each other, but only by showing this kind of animation that we can combine the sound and the 3D model. And I think this is also for us a very nice way to understand that we can take a kind of position that we would never find. So I guess we learned a lot there from the Japanese students as well.
音とかはやっぱり流れてて覚えているんですけれども、空間とかその測った空間は覚えてないんですね。固まっているということです。で、2つを使ってそのような動きとか流れということを理解することもできるんですね。だからいくつかの空間の切った空間を重ねてその動きを作れるんですね。それは我々は使っているアニメーションを使って一つの理解をしてくださるんですね。で、今回のワークショップとかも学生たちと一緒にやってて、それからまたその日本の提案を体験して、いろいろその事件を教えてくださったんです。I think that we have somehow explained everything, so I think that maybe we will ask them if they have some question. 大体いろいろ説明して話してくれたんですけれども、何か質問ありますか？意見ありますか？はい。Yes. そう。
You said that the sounds something, maybe the last thing that's not localized or localized. The sounds that you researched on are about to, they're very historic and about to die out. I lived in Kyoto for 3 years. I just moved to Tokyo actually 4 days ago. very connected to sounds. I lived in an old house, and it's next to a small street, and it's very, you hear everything through that. These small things lighting those, and there were these monks sometimes passing by. So I had a very strong impression where I was through the sound. The sounds that were all about to go away. The monks, I don't know if they're going to be there in 20, 30 years. The cellar that passed every morning and had a song to call his customer.
That's a very good point. We were discussing that with Professor Ono last week. We were all sitting on chairs here.
Yes.
But I wouldn't be that nostalgic. I still think that a city like Tokyo has its sounds that are very, very different from Paris and Zurich, etc. It's just you're talking about really a very particular moment in time. I mean, there's this sort of nostalgia of the Heian period and the Tatami's. And of course, it's a real privilege to go to the places we went to. We're very thankful to KIT for having allowed us to go to those places. But I mean, you could say the same thing about a Swiss chalet with the perfect cow and Heidi taking the milk out every morning, you know. And I think we have to come to grips with our reality. We're 7.5 billion people on the planet, and that's really very seriously changing the everyday reality of life, city life. Still, I think that each culture is able to generate its own specific meaning and sound. And I still think that even young students in Tokyo that have maybe never been to traditional gardens in Tokyo would react to sounds of nature or very, very reduced sounds in a way that's different than our own students. So that's the only thing I'm trying to say. And of course, the point is taken. We're not going to go back on tatamis. I don't think even the young Japanese generation knows how to sit on tatamis anymore. Where's the need?
I would just maybe like to add a small point just to continue or maybe clarify with this point on looking forward to. I think it's very important to recognize that sounds are time in a way. Some of them we will lose, some of them we will win. Some maybe are too much, but some are also missing. So we have this experience that a lot in Switzerland, for example, in the countryside, a lot of people complain about cows, about bells, about cicadas, about birds. So meaning that single sounds, if they are lonely in space, they will become very heavy. So they dominate our space, and maybe in a mixed environment we have a choice what to listen to. If it's too mixed, we cannot choose anymore because it just destroys all the spatial possibilities of differentiation. But Ludwig was talking about balance, and I think if we are approaching these places, on the one hand we take them in a way as you just also showed us, we try to relate the sounds also to the history, to their origin, and recognize also the way they are changing. In other ways, we are looking at the spatial constellations, because landscape in a way is not a single element, it's a relationship between the elements. And we basically look at this spatial constellation, we try to find a way to understand their quality and also how they can be, these qualities be projected in a future with maybe different single sounds, but maybe the space could be, for the spatial constellations, we could learn something from these places. We appreciate them so much.
What will I translate? 多分音の話なんですけれども、場所によっていろんな音があるんですね。多分京都と東京とかもその特別の音があるんでしょうねと。でそれを意識して で、ナディーンの補足なんだけれども、多分スイスでも音の話とかも例えばその田舎の方に行くとみんなが大体その川辺の音とかあるいはその虫の音とかそれが一つの音だけを存在しているすごい強烈になってみんながすごいいい音と思わなくなるんですね。で多分それをいろんな音が重ねていろんな音を共存するということはまあいろいろ考えさせるんです。一つの音とそのいろんな音があると。Combination of one sound with other sounds is actually important rather than just having one sound. So it actually would make relationship. だからそのいろんな音の関係性と場所の関係性、音環境の文化の関係性もいろいろ考えなければならないですね。Is that okay? Yeah. Would you want to add something?
だから今リサーチしてる京都でリサーチしたことがすごい京都にしかないスポットですね。でも特に庭の音が伝統的な音じゃないかということでそれちょっとなくなっていくんじゃないかという世界的グローバリゼーション
音は京都の伝統的な音なんだけれどもなくなるんではなくてそれに戻るんじゃなくてやっぱり進化するということでしょうね。多分それも先生がおっしゃってくれたんですね。だから人生生活とそのとともに進化しなければならないですね。他に何かありますか？ Other questions? Food and sound.
But maybe I can talk to you about food and sound because I can understand that you're most interested to hear about that.
Yeah.
Of course, also like eating is kind of a way of establishing a relationship with the environment.
Because I think food also is very cultural specific sometimes.
Of course, and so I think it's very different if you eat a fondue or if you eat some.
Like I say.
Yes, yes. So of course it's a sound inside, but also outside. We have different tools, and I think we can observe also maybe an ancient but very elaborate tradition in terms of tools and dishes in Japan, and we enjoy them very much. And that's why we decided to found the band. And through making music with these dishes to explore these sounds more. So.
音と食べ物がすごい関係もあるんですね。非常に文化と場所とすごい関係あるからそれが我々も興味があるからそのせいで我々はバンドを作ったんですね。音とフードと食べ物との関係するバンドを今あります。I think that it's about an hour. もう1時間ぐらい我々は話してるんだけど、ナディーンがそれを30分でやってくださいということなので、もし質問とかまだもうなかったらここで終わりたいと思います。So I was just saying that we've been talking for almost an hour already, but Nadine said it should be around just 30 to 40 minutes, but we're overshooting that. So I think that maybe we will close here, and then I think that food and sound and then the future of things would be something that we can look forward to and maybe have a little bit of conversation later. Yeah.
We would most invite you to take your time because the most important part of the exhibition is invisible.
Yeah.
Even under this
だから時間をゆっくり楽しんでくださいと。展覧会の一番大事なのはその見えないものだから、黒い傘あるいはの下にいろいろ楽しんでください。ありがとうございます。Thank you very much.